Hello. So we are in chapter 10, the Darwinian Influence. Yes. Um, so yeah, the theory. Well, I want to qualify myself. The theory of evolution has been around for a long time. Just the general idea that species change over time. Right. That's been around since the early Greek philosophers. Although we, didn't mention the guys that talked about this back then. We skipped over some folks. But But yeah, you're going to look at the fossil record, and you can see it's the same species. It's just a tiny bit different, you know. So it seemed obvious to scientists that species change over time. The big mystery was, how does that happen, right? How do these changes take place over time? So that was always the missing key to the puzzle, right? Is how do species change over time? And it's that missing key to the puzzle of how these changes happen. That's what Darwin found, right? He proposed the theory of evolution through natural selection. He came up with a natural selection part of that, all right? But before we get to him, they do talk about some folks that predate him a little bit. So once again, it seemed obvious to people that species change over time. It's just the question of how. Now they mentioned this Jean Lamarck, right? Lamarck, who once again could tell, right, that the fossils varied for species over time. So it was obvious that species change over time. And, you can see those changes in plants and animals over time. But how does that happen? All right. Now, Lamarck came up with something that is sometimes called Lamarckian evolution, or the inheritance of acquired characteristics, right? So the inheritance of acquired characteristics and Lamarckian evolution, same thing, all right? So this is the idea that if an organism in its own lifetime develops certain physical characteristics, right? Such as I exercise every day and I get, really buff and stuff. And that happens before I have children. After I've changed myself physically, I have children. Well, those changes that I made in myself physically can be passed on to my children, right? The inheritance of acquired characteristics. So I can acquire some characteristics in my own lifetime, and my children can inherit those characteristics, right? That's the inheritance of acquired characteristics, or Lamarckian evolution, right? So once again, they didn't know how these changes happen, so Lamarck proposed that, right? So that's Lamarckian evolution. Then they mentioned Herbert Spencer, right? So Spencer also was interested in evolution, and they do mention there that they give, I guess, Spencer credit for introducing the term intelligence into the field of psychology. It had been around before that, but Spencer gets credit for introducing the term intelligence in the field of psychology. And he went further than Lamarck. Spencer thought that, well, first of all, I guess we have to say, things can become associated with each other in the mind. And that happens pretty much through the law of contiguity, according to Spencer, right? Contiguity, those laws of association, principle of contiguity, contiguous events happen close in time to each other, can be connected together in the mind, right? So if they happen simultaneously or close in time to each other, they can become associated. Those ideas can become associated in my mind. So he pretty much relied on that, and basically this sort of led to him beyond the inheritance of acquired physical characteristics. Spencer thought you could acquire those mental associations too. You could pass those on to your children as well. So, if you have these experiences and you learn this stuff before you have in the mind, before you have children, you can pass that on to your children. So if I if I went to college, I got my PhD, and if I were to have children now, they'd be smarter. I could pass on my smartness. I could pass on what I've learned, right? That's just nonsense. right? And let me make this clear, right? The inheritance of acquired characteristics, Lamarckian evolution, what Spencer initially talked about, the inheritance of, I guess, these acquired associations, it's all BS. It does not happen. It's not true. All right? These are all things they're getting wrong before Darwin comes along. All right? So I mentioned that, and then we've mentioned in earlier chapters, of course, hedonism and that idea that organisms will do things that lead to pleasant outcomes and they will not do things that lead to unpleasant outcomes. Well, I just applied that to evolution here. Spencer did. So they talk about it as being kind of, evolutionary associationism, but it's also called the Spencer-Bane principle. Right? Spencer-Bane principle, as it says here, right? The contention that the frequency or probability of some behavior increases if it is followed by a pleasurable event and decreases if it is followed by a painful event. Spencer-Bane principle. Obviously, that is the key foundation of Thorndike's law of effect, right? So Thorndike and his theory of learning, right? And then also obviously of Skinner and operant conditioning. So that's a key thing in psychology, the area of learning, or the early school of behaviorism in psychology, right? So that's important about him. And then I guess here too, they just mentioned in here that, so he thinks you can kind of learn these acquired associations, right? Those can be passed on to children, and then once Darwin's theory came out, he adjusted that a little bit based on Darwin's theory and just shifted from emphasizing those acquired characteristics to the process of natural selection. He started to emphasize more natural selection being the way things happen, and of course we know that is true today. And then unfortunately, well, there are lots of things that are misunderstood about evolution, and they even say in here that Spencer either misunderstood Darwin's theory, or just disagreed with it and so proposed some other stuff. All right. So Spencer unfortunately introduced the phrase "survival of the fittest." Right, survival of the fittest. Now, when people hear that phrase, survival of the fittest, they think the survival of the strongest, the biggest, the baddest, right, is what they think. But that's not, no. That might have been what Spencer thought, but not in evolutionary theory today, right? Survival of the fittest today means survival of those that best fit or match their environment. That's what it means. Right, today. That's the true meaning of it. So when we say survival of the fittest, we're not talking about survival of the strongest. We're not talking about survival of the most intelligent either. Right? You're just talking about those that best fit their environment are going to be more likely to survive, right, and reproduce than those who do not fit their environment very well. That's what survival of the fittest means. And yeah, there are lots of species here on Earth that are way older than us Homo sapiens, and they're, dumb as a rock, but they fit their environment, and so they've lived and survived, right, for way longer than us. So you don't have to be the biggest, baddest, most intelligent to survive. That's a misunderstanding. So also when Darwin came up with his theory of evolution through natural selection, he said that there's no goal or purpose to evolution through natural selection. It just happens, right? There are differences in members of a species, individual differences. Some of those members of the species better fit that environment, and so more likely to survive and reproduce and have more children with those characteristics that are passed on, right? But there's no purpose or goal to evolution. Spencer thought there was, right? Spencer thought that basically there was a purpose to evolution, that evolution was about an organism, especially humans, approaching perfection. So he saw evolution as the species is getting, stronger, smarter, and eventually one day humans will evolve to perfection. That's a misunderstanding. That's wrong, and it's a misunderstanding of Darwin's theory, right? That's nonsense. And you see this sometimes in science fiction shows and stuff. No, it's all BS. No, there's no purpose to evolution. Humans are not evolving towards perfection. Humans are not becoming smarter or dumber. There's no purpose to evolution. There's just not. All right? So that's one misunderstanding there. And then another thing that Spencer did is he tried to apply these Darwinian principles to society as a whole as well. And so he thought that human societies go through this process of evolution as well. And unfortunately, that became named social Darwinism, right? Social Darwinism. I say unfortunately because why'd you have to throw Darwin's name on it? But having said that, so it's a misunderstanding too. No, evolution is for members of a species. It's not for societies. Or not the same processes anyway are involved with societies, but they thought they were. Spencer thought they were. And that became a widely held belief, right, in the Western world. And heck, there are probably still some idiots that believe this crap, right? That societies evolve in a similar way towards perfection and so forth. So they do mention that, obviously this influenced what Spencer thought governments should do. He thought governments should be pretty laissez-faire. If you've heard of that term, laissez-faire, hands off, right? Just let the corporations compete with each other. Government should not regulate them, and the best and strongest corporations will win out. Same idea for societies, right? Let these different societies compete with each other. The strongest, the best will win out. And so that kind of thinking, right, was very popular late 1800s, early 1900s. And it helped, of course, the big industrialists here in America believed in that. Carnegie, Rockefeller, they all believed this stuff. That we're the best. We should be able to batter and shut down our competitors. If we're capable of doing that, we should be able to do that. This kind of attitude, though, also helped rationalize colonialism, right? Why is Europe, rule over the colonies of the world? Because they're the best society, right? They're the strongest and the most intelligent. That's why it's only appropriate that we run the lives of these simpletons, right? So there's a lot of bad stuff here, right? And there's a lot of bad stuff in this chapter about how this stuff has been misunderstood and led to bad things. So they also mentioned with Spencer, the strongest should win out, the weakest you should let die off. So Spencer was also against, government helping out the poor. Why should government help out the poor? They're poorer because they're stupid and dumb. You should just let them die out. Why should we help them, right? And this, of course, helped rationalize the eugenics, field of eugenics in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And eugenics, of course, that's the view that we need to, there's a number of views incorporated into eugenics, and they talk about this later in the chapter under intelligence, how intelligence, such a terrible idea and term, and led to terrible things. But the field of eugenics was very popular with scientists, and all scientists agreed on the eugenics. Early 1900s, always be careful if all scientists agree on something. Put on your skeptical hat at that point, because politics can enter science, and it did in the early 1900s through World War II, basically. Eugenics is the idea we need to selectively breed humans, right? We need to, make sure that the intelligent humans have children so we can have intelligent children. And maybe government should even help them out and pay them to have children. And those who are deemed unintelligent, maybe we should even take some proactive steps to forcefully sterilize those people. And maybe we should even euthanize some of those people. Just go ahead and kill them. Right? This is the evil, dark place that some of this social Darwinism helped lead to. And so obviously the Nazis carried that out to an extreme, right? Euthanizing individuals who had mental illnesses. And there were scientists all over the Western world, including in America, saying that, oh man, those Nazis, they're doing it right. In the 1930s, they were saying that kind of crap. So this is how science can go off the rails, right? Something. But anyway, I'll stop this there, and we'll move on to Darwin next.